What's up, investors? Chase here from the Note MBA podcast. On this week's episode, we have Robert Woods, the amazing, the incredible Robert Woods, and David Deglinski and myself talking about real estate, talking about notes. We talk about a CFD out of Oklahoma. We talk about David going through his first tape. Did he submit bids or did he not? It's a pretty interesting story as to why and why not. And then, of course, we have Mr. Woods talking about travel, talking about deals, talking about other things happening in and around our business. Check out this week's episode right now.
It was not a sexy deal, but we knew with our team it was likely we were going to be able to do something someone else couldn't.
Well, here's the challenge that I have with using a phrase saying it's not a sexy deal, because
first, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you, tuition free. If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out notemba.com. Now, here are your hosts, Chase Thompson and Robert Woods.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Note MBA podcast, your home for note investing on iTunes. I am Chase Thompson, and I am excited to say this week, joined by Mr. Robert Woods and David Deglinski. Gentlemen.
How are we doing today?
Hello.
Listen, I'm just glad that, this only happens about once every 4,000 years astronomically, that the stars align and really fun things happen, the Halley's Comet situation. I'm really excited that we're all on the show today. We're all kind of bringing different news and updates from our business and life and all this kind of stuff. I'm pumped, man. I'm pumped to have you both on the phone.
Pumped to be here, buddy. It's been a while. How many weeks has it been? I've had a nice little holiday from the show with travel, because I've been nonstop on the road.
You have. You've even been to some places that, don't have service. You've been to places that, you've just been everywhere. Like you'll text me from a phone. Yeah, you text me and you're like, hey, by the way, da-da-da-da. And then you're like, oh, and I'm getting my phone essentially is taken away from me in 10 minutes because I'll be in the air. Or just touch and go, man. You've been killing it. Burning it from both ends.
I have been. So now I'm back from Asia, East Asia, technically. And now I'm just going to be traveling for the next 3 months as I clean out my portfolio. I spent this time on the road and had some business transitions going on with what we're focusing on and buying. So, I guess we'll jump into it. I'm already hitting the road the end of this weekend for Atlanta. And then next week I have a cousin that's getting married in Ohio. So I'll be spending some time in the Chicago to Columbus corridor of Ohio and selling off some of the loans we've got that just no longer are at a size that makes sense for the portfolio, given some of my vendors up there that I'm working with.
Yeah, so this will be not this weekend when this airs, but the following weekend after that. So if you're listening to the show, and you're not, binge listening 6 months from now, this is kind of the end of June 2017. Oh, we're going to throw everybody off. So you'll be there in a couple of weekends, and if anybody's out in the area, definitely let him know, because you've got some deals that you're looking to get rid of because of the price bracket. And
yeah, well, the portfolio's just got too many notes in it.
Yeah.
So anything really that's a property value under, about $75,000, I'm going to start selling off from my portfolio.
Amazing. So similarly, if you're keeping up with news, Fannie Mae is transferring some risk on about $19.8 billion in single family loans. We're going to transfer some risk on not as much, but a little bit. It'll be good. And is the Ohio market not off the table for you? But I know that one of the reasons why we had gone into that area to begin with was some of those price points, was that you could pick up, say, decent properties and different things like that. So it doesn't necessarily take Ohio off the table, or even obviously the Cleveland, Canton, Columbus area, but just with your familiarity of that area, does it take some of that out of contention just because so much of it might be in a price bracket that's like not really where we're focusing now?
So it's like one of these yes and no answers, because what you said, yes, that's the reason we're leaving from that perspective, but it doesn't. It's just kind of where the flashlight's being shined right now. Shut it off, get rid of a few things, clean up, turn it back on in a different corner, and go look for some larger deals up there. A lot of it's just been a transition of my business to where, the reality is why manage $50,000 notes when I can focus, better on $250,000 note.
Yeah, for sure. And we've discussed that numerous times, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's part of it too. Is we talked about it's nice to build up the portfolio. We found really good deals, and then I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, if I can manage these, why not go and try to put the portfolio together and manage now 5 $250,000 notes, and just expanding the business till those are too large and you're too many and you're focusing on just more higher value product.
And then you just keep stepping up for sure. And you tend to, for maybe someone who's just getting started, that's like just found the show or what have you, some people are obviously going to start in that price bracket, right? Like that's just maybe their familiarity or whatever the case may be. But I've found that you tend to also meet those investors along the way that are obviously ready to do the bigger deals, right? And so I think a lot of people may be like, oh, I'm struggling to maybe find someone with 40 grand to like fund this deal or whatever. Well, as you start getting up there, like you start meeting the investors or being able to find the money or whatever to kind of move to that bigger price bracket, if that's the direction you want to go. I wouldn't call it easily, but I've definitely seen that kind of fall into line, right? Like as you start to grow, you start meeting those people, and the business can just organically grow that way if that's the direction you feel like you can go.
Yeah, I'd have to agree completely. But, a big part of it's mindset, and then the other part is, are you at a spot where you can pull the trigger on those? So it's a double-edged sword that's good to go fighting with.
I just had a great conversation with a friend of ours that is working or has been working on his mindset. We've actually talked about him a couple times on the show. Peter Lang. He's been working with Michelle. She's been on the show before and kind of getting his mindset, getting it worked on. And he's like, man, I've cut my hours in half and I've doubled my income. And I'm like, I don't even know what the math on that in terms of like, profitability has become. He's like, oh, it's crazy. He was like, he was giddy as a schoolgirl on the other side of the phone talking about how he's been working 7-hour days. Like that could, from like where he had come. He's like, man, I'm working like 7-hour days and I am loving it. Like he was so excited. So yeah, mindset, obviously very, very important. And that just kind of came to my mind because I was talking with him yesterday. So that's fantastic.
And Mr. Glinsky, what do you got going on?
So far I'm finishing up the 2 flips I've got here in Orlando. I'm almost done with one of them. So that's exciting. So I can take that money, reinvest it into notes, and finally start buying some of the first note deals in my portfolio. The past week has been doing some due diligence on a tape that I got. And it's been interesting. I've asked Chase here and there a couple questions, and it's just been a learning experience. I've been trying to see how much I can do on my own before I start reaching out for help. But it's been really great. I've been using Due Diligence Pro. That's been really helpful.
What about, so since you've been using that, and since I've been on the show, we were out Paper Source was probably the last one that had any of me on there. And then I was down in IMN in Dana Point, like 3.5, 4 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. We talked to some people. What are some of the things that you've been using it that you would like to see different about it?
The ability to add extra sites. So it's great with the sites that like you can auto-populate as soon as you pop in the address, but it'd be really great to put in like, maybe a specific site somebody uses more regularly. Like since I'm a realtor here in Florida, I use RPR, which is the NAR RPR, the realtor report thing.
But you have to have a membership for RPR.
Right. So that's why I said, since I'm a realtor, I use that since I have a membership, but just like, and maybe not to the point where, like the address gets populated into that, since, I don't know how the membership thing would work out, but maybe if it just pulls up the site so I can just paste the address in afterwards, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
We've had a couple of suggestions on some sites that some people would like to see us added. I've actually got my tab open to send the developer an update on. For anybody that has started using Due Diligence Pro, there's actually been an update already done to the software. So make sure that you've either gone back in, if you're using Safari, download that update, or if you're at Chrome, it automatically pushes to you, which is great. But that's actually something we can throw out there. It's been a request from some people already.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I guess we're openly talking about it. The Due Diligence Pro was not to be a money-making scheme. It was simply something I wanted created for myself and figured, hey, maybe other people can get value out of it. So as we have more people register and suggestions like that, it's a non-issue to spend the money with the developer to add those types of things in. And we're working on making incremental growth, as one would say. We're making it a more functional tool.
Indeed. So we had talked right before we started recording on that due diligence you had been doing, and obviously said you were getting out of some flips, so you didn't get any bids submitted on that. What, kind of mentally, mindset wise, right? Because we've got people that are just getting in the business that are just going to be starting in the same place you're in on the due diligence part. Were you seeing deals that you're like, this might be something I'd take a swing at? Where were you finding your apprehension points? Like, or mentally, what were you finding to be the biggest sticking points kind of moving forward on getting bids submitted?
So what we talked about last week, knowing like the number that you're wanting to make or willing to go down to, was a thought that I definitely sat on for a couple of days, because I mean, you're asking yourself, like, how much do you want to make? How much are you willing to take, and how hard are you willing to work? So definitely put some thought in there. Some sticking points, I think, were looking at areas of the country that I'm not super familiar with. So like obviously the ones in Florida and maybe even like a couple in Georgia, because I've driven through there once or twice. Like I feel a little more comfortable because, I've at least touched that ground. Other ones, like the ones in Tennessee or South Carolina, just I have never been there. So it's a little harder for me to trust what exactly the sites are saying and what the due diligence, even what the due diligence says. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's an interesting kind of perspective on it. And the only reason is because Chase and I have talked about it before in the past about really, even actually when Scott was first training us, it was the, pick 5 markets, find your 5 markets. And then from there, we kind of found 50 markets, it feels like, to bot in. And it's, it's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The peanut butter got spread a little thin. So now maybe not 50 markets, but, how do you think you'll go about narrowing down other markets that you're going to learn about? Because some of them, I don't want to say you're going to have to go into blind, but you're really just going to have to go into and then go build your team. And I think, as we refer to the co-opetition, and it'll come full circle, but, you can reach out to other people in the space and, we'll share vendors. But for instance, one of a vendor I've spent a lot of money with in Ohio is one I cannot wait to stop doing business with. And it was a referral from a friend in the business. So part of it is just jumping in, and you're going to have to, you can't really put a toe in the water sometimes to actually develop a market in one spot or another and get that market knowledge. So how do you think you'll make those decisions?
So, and this is just coming off the top of my head, but what I would do is maybe cross-reference between, the few friends I do have in this space. Luckily, I've met people like Adam Adams and Wayne Snell and a couple other people. So probably reach out to them, just kind of talk to them, see why they chose their markets and that kind of stuff, and kind of average out everybody's response and see what they say as far as to what's a good idea for picking a market or why they chose their markets. And maybe if one of theirs intrigues me, I might do that. Besides that, maybe just extensive Googling as far as wherever, but having to maybe set a day, time, or goal as far as the Googling, so it doesn't become that analysis paralysis type of thing.
So since you're just getting started, the one thing I'm going to suggest this just as an idea, and everybody starts in the A's kind of because it's, Alabama. What is it actually? Is Alabama the first state with initials, right? ARAK. Yeah, it's Alabama's.
Alabama.
State.
Yeah.
Alabama, Arizona.
Yeah. I know what I'm doing. I remember fourth grade geography. Well, shit, after being overseas with Europeans who probably know the state capitals better than we do, sometimes you need to test yourself. But go back to where you said trying to find out what return you wanted on the deals that you had. And did you build out a model of any type?
I've been starting to work on a ROI calculator, but I'm not going to say it's the prettiest or most functional looking thing. So
it's a very basic, get you started kind of ROI calculator.
Right.
I think that's the best start. But I think using something like that, and here's the catch. I would tell you to stay in bigger cities, try not to go rural yet, but literally just work down a tape, analyzing deals anywhere you can find them that meets your city requirements. And if you find one that hits your yield, maybe think about making that a market if you're seeing enough deals in that market, and get outside of your circle of the Florida and Georgia, since you and I are down here in the Southeast. It's kind of like somebody in Texas just looking in Texas. When they could look, go north, like Chase was talking about. You guys had that deal in Oklahoma we're going to talk about in a little bit. And, how did Oklahoma happen? The investor that, the group that's working on that with you is, you guys are buying more in Oklahoma and looking more in Oklahoma. And I think it's one of those things is, how did that happen? There was a deal that looked good, and then all of a sudden, let's pull the trigger and we'll find out more about Oklahoma as we work on it.
That has actually been exactly the case. And the reason why this one was such an attractive deal, even though when you look at the numbers, which we can kind of transition, I guess, but to kind of speak to the ability that you have once you've started to utilize kind of what Robby's talking about, is if you look at the numbers of the deal that we'll go over now, it didn't look as slam dunk as some of the other deals that we've done in the past. But it was because this deal wasn't our first in that market, and we had isolated it before. We had now had a decent team on the ground. It's now a place that we're really comfortable going back into. After this many deals that we've done, that kind of thing, it made this deal that might have looked skinny on paper look incredibly serviceable. Like let's rock and roll. This is going to be something we can do business with here. And I know that Robby's actually talked about that before on deals where he's bid on stuff where, and he, especially initially for sure, but like he does that with his own money kind of thing. He talks about doing that all the time, but like he'll bid on something where other people are like, wait, why are you even looking at this? This doesn't, the ratio of say this to this don't make sense or whatever. And it's because he trusts the market. He knows the market. He's got a team in place or what have you. So in this case, we had a team in place on this one, and it produced a really great deal that might not have happened otherwise, essentially. So what we had this was a CFD in OKC proper, is in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And the acquisition cost on this particular deal was $24,000. And what we got from, as far as contributions, initial, JV investor gave us $30,475. So it kind of covered some of those expenses and all of this kind of stuff that we were anticipating going down the line. So on this deal, acquisition was 24. The value that we got, the highest that we thought it could get to, that kind of thing, had we had to take it back and sell it or that kind of thing, was around the 42 range, potentially. So the people that we had bought this deal from, the reason why they were even selling it was because they just could not get a hold of the owner of the CFD. They tried all the different methods that they could think of to potentially get a hold of this, the homeowner, right? The person that was holding the lien here, but couldn't do it. They couldn't do it, and they were really interested because it looked like this individual might be doing some renovations on the property. So they were thinking, maybe this is something we could keep in the portfolio, maybe, or they're doing some renovations. Maybe we can work out a deal. They just didn't know what was going on. So they were trying to get a hold of, couldn't do it, which is why we were even able to scoop up this deal in the first place. And that's why I say potentially get about 42 for it, was because that was market value without any of these, ARV numbers that potentially could have been a part of it, right? Which would have got it maybe into the 70 range. So buying it at 24, acquisition at 24, JV in at 30 sounds great if you're going as high as 70, but on this particular deal at 42, it might not seem as great, essentially.
So how did that knowledge of knowing that the other people couldn't figure out who the person was, how did that not scare you from buying the note?
That goes back to us now having the better boots on the ground. We had a better team in place. This was an out-of-state investor. We knew that they weren't in the area. We knew that they probably weren't jumping through as many hoops as they said they were. Like, they, I feel like you're going to find that in any walk of life. But essentially what we had assumed in this deal was just that they don't have the team in place we have, which we knew was going to be the case. But it fleshed out that was absolutely the case. We made right party contact our first try because we had a better person reaching out, essentially.
And that there you go is what you need. If you can actually get in front of the person, they can at least tell you to beat sand or tell you, hey, we'll work together. Let's try to do something. Yeah,
exactly. So, and funny enough, on this particular deal, the first reaction was you can go pound sand, which we thought was fascinating. That somebody else had been trying to get a hold of, quote unquote. They weren't able to sell it to us. Then we make contact immediately, and he's like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. So we're like, all right, this is weird already. So of course we try to make contact again, and he says, how about a short payoff? And we were like, okay, this might be interesting. We would have been only in the deal for a couple of months at this point. It's not going to be a great ROI, but we can reinvest investor money. It'll look great as far as an annualized bit. We'll see what he has to say. To which he fired back. He wanted to do a $19,000 short payoff, which was obviously absurd and not going to work at all. So we essentially said, hey, we'll let you stay in the house. It can be a performing deal, but you've got to let us come and take internal pictures because it looks like you might be doing some renovations from the outside, which he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he kind of went dark. So we were going to start the process of going through the foreclosure, all that kind of stuff, of getting them out of the property, or eviction to get them out of the property. And then he sold it. He sold it, and we got full payoff of $38,000.
So your payoff was $38K.
Yeah.
How much did you spend with the attorney when you initiated the foreclosure?
Yeah, so this is where it gets kind of interesting because at 38 to 30 doesn't sound super great, except for the fact that the total expenses because we were only in it for 4 months before that sale happened, and then the 5th month carried over from another issue we can discuss if you'd like. But we'd only spent about $1,800 at that point of those additional funds. Yeah.
So you made 12 on 26.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 5 months.
In 5 months. Yeah.
Is 91% return or some stuff like that.
Yeah. It wasn't terrible, right? So I think Grant, it's like 84 or 48 or something backed out or what have you. But it was a phenomenal return. We got it out really quickly, all of that kind of stuff notwithstanding. So what was kind of interesting on this deal, though, is that we got a full payoff at 38. He sold it. But just because we were curious, we went through the docs to see how did he get this thing sold? Well, like what did he do? How did what was going on? Obviously, he was in his full right to be able to sell it still. It looks like he sold it to an LLC, which is interesting, who then immediately went out and got a hard money loan because he was actually doing the renovations on it. He does intend to go sell this thing for I think what the agent said, it could yield anywhere between 70 to 74 or something like that, kind of fully renovated. So it sounds to me like he took a swing at 19. He's like, we'll see what these guys have to say. And then went dark, found a buddy who he could, kind of sell it to. And then immediately went out and got hard money. He's fixing it up and he's just going to flip it. Which is fine because we're sitting at a great return. Our investor's happy. She's 5 months, right? She's like, all right, slam dunk. Return was great. Numbers are great. Annualized great. We weren't particularly excited about taking it back because we didn't really know kind of where we were at with it. We just had ideas because he wouldn't obviously let us come in and take photos. But it seems like it was a win-win situation regardless. What looked like we were potentially, going to have to do something, foreclose or obviously evict or whatever the case may be. But Yeah, so it was really kind of a weird deal. Great, profitable, in and out, and it looks like he bought it back-ish and is now renovating it and going to sell it. So kind of a fascinating little deal. So yeah.
How'd you find this CFD?
Well, we can discuss that if you. No, it was honestly through a contact we've talked about on the show already. It was
okay.
Sort of.
You have to listen back to some of the old shows. At some point, you'll figure out who it was.
Yeah, we actually had CFD talk with a prior guest on the show. So anybody who's been binge listening will have to go back, right? But really, that's honestly true. That's just kind of where it came from, and I don't think it was a deal, like I said, that a lot of people were found to be a sexy deal, right? It seemed much shorter because it was 42 value. It looked like you were going to have to pick it up for that 24, right? But then if you obviously do what we do, which is throw some of those numbers in for the, acquisition plus, right? It was not a sexy deal. But we knew with our team, it was likely we were going to be able to do something someone else couldn't. And that's literally what happened.
Well, here's the challenge that I have with using a phrase saying it's not a sexy deal, because we've been doing this a little longer. And if you parallel that to somebody that makes $50,000 a year, $12,000 in 5 months is a pretty nice bonus for doing a single deal correctly. That turns pretty sexy when you make $50,000 a year. You make $500,000 a year. You're like, shit, I need to do 5 of these a month.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right? Which is definitely where our base kind of listener and what have you, the investors that have come through us have come through. It was a unique one insofar as, and we didn't know how it was necessarily going to. This is our first CFD that we were kind of getting into that looked like it could go some different ways, right? Like it had some more directions, which was kind of the unique one about it. But like I said, we had a great team in place. That was the reason why we executed on it. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Speaking of deals and getting in touch with borrowers, I've got one unique thing they kind of piggyback because it's about the Chicago market. I had a non-performing note that I purchased. We paid I paid 72, 73 grand. Chase, you may remember, in Chicago. It was a non-performing.
I think it's 70. I think it was 73. It was like just over, I think, but 73, I think, is where it was at. Yeah. Yeah.
So the 73, the balance on the loan was 100 grand, though the payoff was about 113. And this loan is to an LLC, so it's got an adjusted foreclosure rate of, I think, 17% on the mortgage. So it's an aggressive kind of setup. But the borrower started making some payments. He made a tax payment. The taxes were going to sale, and we actually worked out a great deal. We got the taxes paid off, and it was like $8,700. He used his annual bonus to pay off the taxes, and he started making payments. And then he stopped, and I just noticed it was the second month he hadn't made a payment. And I reached out to him to kind of find out what was going on. He just said, listen, I can't afford this. And it's the emotional aspect. This house has been in his family for a while. And he's personally, what he says, I think these numbers get exaggerated. So let's, take that with a grain of salt. But he said he's put about $100,000 into the property. I haven't seen any internal pictures. I haven't asked for them either because he started making payments and we weren't negotiating a short sale or anything. And I would guess the property's evaluation somewhere around $140,000. So at some level, he's got equity in the property. If you sold it for that, not really when you think about what he actually has to pay off if he continues to not pay and I have to go through a foreclosure. But I basically reached out to him. And I was like, hey, I need you to make at least this type of payment and we'll be able to work something out. So I cut his payment in half so that I'm still making a 10% yield on the deal as it sits. If he just makes those payments, I make 10% on what I've got into it. So it's not too big of a deal. And I'm getting ready to go up to Chicago to go talk with him because he had threatened me with a bankruptcy. He's like, well, I'm just going to file a bankruptcy. And the point he does that, now all this loan is going to do is cost me more money. I'll have no money coming in, so it's kind of like a double whammy. And I think with this, we'll be able to work something out. What actual numbers or what we're going to need to do, I don't know. But since we've had contact, I'd offered to set up a deal with an independent third party to just go do a non-binding mediation, to just go say, let's go sit down with an uninterested third party and see if we can do it. So now him and I are going back and forth with our schedules, trying to find out when I'm going to be able to be in Chicago, and we can overlap conveniently to just sit down and have a meeting, meet face to face, go over the numbers, and just maybe realistically draw out to him what his options are going to be, or what that kind of choose your own door adventure looks like if he elects to file a bankruptcy or goes into foreclosure, or I have to go into foreclosure, excuse me. Mm-hmm. So that's another interesting one that just popped up, because I was reading an article in one of these real estate magazines I get the other day, and what I'm doing in a separate subject is for landlords. We're building up a fairly decent rental portfolio in a few select markets, and I had two things happen in one of my buildings in Chicago. We had one of the tenants, unfortunately, he passed away. And he was a great tenant from day one. The rest of the building was kind of a little what you would expect dealing with a foreclosed property in Chicago market. And this guy had rent every month. If I wasn't there by the 7th or 8th of the month, he was calling me, telling me he had it, he wanted to pay it. Why didn't I come get it yet? Sadly he passed away, and his girlfriend and their son are still in the property. And I basically was like, we'll give them 2 months before we need to worry about it. And she's trying to figure out what she can pay. But what I realized we didn't have was basically spreadsheet or contact information to reach out and see what all the different assistance programs are for your tenants when they get in trouble with something like that on the rental side. It's kind of would be like if you handheld somebody through hardest hit. So we're creating essentially like a handout for 3 of the markets that I've got, that essentially, what are the church organizations, what are the government organizations, who will give assistance, and what are the requirements? How much will they give? Who will they give it to? What will it cover, and for how long? Emails, phone numbers, and contact information. So we can at least give those to anyone that maybe starts making late payments or struggling with their rent, or what's going to happen, just to mitigate what you've got to go through in an eviction process to get somebody out, and hopefully you can get them transitioned to somewhere in the interim, as opposed to having to be the big bad evil landlord that's evicting people.
That's incredible. And not incredible that something like that had to happen that kind of spurred that, situation, but obviously it's a great, kind of outcome to have had out of something that isn't. How are you going about doing that research almost on behalf of, and is this part of your packet when maybe they start getting a little late? Is this part of the packet right at the start? Like, when do you think you'll be putting this in their hands? I'm
having a VA do the research right now. So it just got got started 3 days ago. Mm-hmm. So I've got a VA doing the research for it. Basically put it together into like a formalized, like a handout, something that looks good with the company name stuff on it. And I think it's probably one of those things we're just going to test. I want my property managers to have it. And I think it's a good, just best business practices. Somebody makes rent payments late, a couple months in a row, or you start seeing it, that the first time it happens, you kind of hand it out, with the 5-day notice, you give them this other sheet. It's, it costs you 4 cents to print off a piece of paper.
Yeah, for sure.
Give that information and kind of make that into a habit that whenever you're going to put up a 5-day notice, that needs to go with it.
Oh, that's really cool. And it's great for numerous reasons. What were you going to say, David?
No, I'm just, that's really thoughtful. I mean, the fact that you're doing that for them would probably make them want to cooperate more with you instead of fight you.
Yeah, and I think, that's the big goal with it. And I think it's unique situations. You're going to have individuals that you're just not going to be able to work with them. I think that's just a law of large numbers when you get to a certain size. But what's unique with like Danielle, the girlfriend who is still in the property, what's unique with her is, that's a different situation. She's not, let's give her the piece of paper. She's let's make the phone call on her behalf and find out what we can do or who can help. And then it's kind of like at that point, it's now not if you just told them about hardest hit, you've gone and gotten the paperwork and taken the paperwork to them. And, maybe you even need to go sit with them and, watch them fill it out. But at the end of the day, I think it's a very small amount of time invested for what could pay, a reasonably decent dividend for the one eviction. It only really has to do save you from one eviction or get your rent consistently paid on time by one tenant to have been a worthwhile exercise for what you're going to go out and do the research for.
That is, that's super cool. I think that 100% is a scenario where you aren't even thinking about how does it pay for itself? Because you're just, we've talked about numerous times on the show, like when we do a very interesting thing within the real estate space, and we get a really unique opportunity where when somebody wants to come to the table and wants to work with you, wants to communicate, wants to whatever, we'll do not anything, but pretty much whatever we can, right? You're talking about going out to meet with this guy from mediation and all this kind of business. And if they're absolutely just going to be the antithesis of that, we're very capable of just, doing what we need to do to move forward, right? And when they're being a decent human being, you can be the same. And this is just the equivalent, right? Like, what's the ROI of being a decent human being? Like, there isn't. It just that's just what you should do. Like, that's so fantastic. It's such a great idea.
And there's two things I want to play in on that with is in a separate article, and then it'll kind of be my long-winded finish to this podcast for this week. Part of like having those tenants, listen, my job is not here to pay rent for grown adults anywhere in the world. Like, it's not what I want to do. I'm not running a nonprofit. I give my charity in a very different way. And to be honest, though I can be sympathetic, I'm not going to be empathetic that much for most people that are not paying their bills. At a certain point in time, people just need to be responsible. And I don't feel I'm an individual who what I'm here to do in this limited amount of time we have on earth is not help subsidize other people's rent. Mm-hmm. But the ability to subsidize other people's rent at time to time, because you necessarily don't need the income, comes from a very different part of what I want to talk about, which is, I've been gone for 8 weeks, just about, Chase?
Yeah.
So 2 months. It's been great because I haven't had to do the show, but it's been a great 2 months. And I just got finished reading another article, different real estate magazine, talking about what's your number. And I'll be honest, my number always changes, but what they were referring to is how much money do you need to make every month? Or how much money do you want to make every month? From your basic lifestyle expenses to how do you make that number grow so you're able to do things that are maybe either more expensive from an experience perspective, maybe more expensive from a material acquisition, if that's what you find happiness in, or some realm of that. And having been able to hit that number quite a while ago, I spent a month out in California filming a movie, and I was able to keep my note and real estate business going, which is my primary goal and my primary concern financially, while enjoying myself, having fun, creating a new job with this movie, and then taking the time to go to Asia. I just got back from a trip, which we haven't talked about. So we'll kind of segue into there where, I was in Beijing for a few days, but I actually just got back from spending 5 days in the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, commonly referred to on the news as North Korea, which was an extremely view-changing trip. It's just the tip of the iceberg from what we see in Western media that I think is distorted, and we won't take it into a political talk, but having been able to establish something like that and be able to do it when somebody doesn't pay their rent or you're not doing these things, if you haven't stabilized your lifestyle expenses or hit your number and you're doing these things, you cannot deal with the oscillations in income if you're still spending up to your limit or you haven't established what your number is and then found a way to get a number significantly higher than just what your overhead expenses are. When I traveled before, and we talked about when I started this company, I was running around staying at the Motel 6. There were times I was in Ohio joking around at my grandfather's place. I slept in a tent when I was in a few cities doing tours, looking at real estate property. And it's nice to go to Beijing and stay in the number one hotel for a couple days. And it was a splurge. I mean, it was a mortgage payment in the West for sure for a few days to lay my head on a pillow. But it's also, for me, that's finding ways to spend money on more luxurious experiences, just because of knowing what that number is, establishing it, and being able to go out and get it and maintain it, and make adjustments from there. So the one more thing, where it was at with this article, and another thing is refocusing on what that number is. I think there's an incredibly large amount of the population truly does not have any grasp of their personal finances and an understanding of what they need from a month-to-month perspective. They basically know that $7,000 comes in and $698 went out last month, and then $8,200 got spent the next month, and they're still chasing paycheck to paycheck. Even as their income increases, they find a way to raise the ceiling on what they're spending, just up practically to the amount of money they're bringing in. So anyway, that's my last 2 cents for today.
These are the segments that I miss the most whenever you take long breaks, because I, start to finish, agree with 110% of it, right? Because I agree completely, and I, obviously have additional things I would add, but this has already been a decently length show. Delightful. Well, thank you guys so much. If this is your first time here, be sure to go over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, and of course, subscribe. Everything that we've talked about will be in the show notes over at NoteMBA.com as always. And remember, this week, be sure to tell 5 other people you know about the Note MBA podcast. Catch you guys next week.
Have a good one, guys.
See you later.